life expectancy is, for the first time in the history of humanity, nobody's really talking about it, is declining. So notwithstanding all the advancements in conventional healthcare, medications, and procedures and the like, we're actually losing our ability to get people to live longer because the disease process is outgrowing and outrunning our ability to treat it and overcome it. So people are living less and less. And so it's not anything we should be patting ourselves on the back that we can get people to live 77 years of life, and that's longer than any other period of human existence. We have never been more diseased.
Welcome to the Carnivore Revolution. And today I have with me Dr. O'Mara. He is located in Minnesota. He's an award-winning physician specializing in health and performance optimization. He's a researcher and was an emergency medicine physician at the U.S. Army Medical Corps, and also served several senior government officials, including President Clinton and Vice President Cheney. And I'm really excited. And one of the things that we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about something that I know you love. We're going to talk about reversing chronic diseases. But first, I would like to talk about your story and what brought you to this extreme way of eating and helping your patients actually get better.
Sure. So during my time in the U.S. Army, taking care of what we call the Senior Executive Service, which are the senior most executives in our U.S. government, presidents, vice presidents, secretaries of state, I got really good at practicing medicine, emergency medicine. I could handle gunshots, heart attacks, strokes, and things like that. But gradually, with all this kind of capability that would move around with the president and vice president, and then later in my company I set up for concierge medicine, we had this large medical practice to react to problems. I started to think, how could you use that capability to maybe prevent problems? And so I was intrigued at trying to think about hospital level gear to prevent disease and things. And it didn't have a real good fit for my high-end clients. But during that same time period, I was about 48 and I was putting on weight myself. And so the relevance of trying to prevent disease was hitting home with me. I had terrible heartburn. I had precancerous lesions in my esophagus. I had eczema. I had erectile dysfunction, and I had an enlarged prostate that was having me get up 4 times a night or 5 times a night to pee. I couldn't even pee anymore. It just kind of dribble out of me. It was an awful sensation for an existence for a man. And I had restless leg syndrome. I couldn't sleep. I had obstructive sleep apnea, terrible problems. And there I was working one day in the hospital. Every day I would bring in a gallon of milk, and chocolate syrup was loaded in it. And I thought I was being healthy, drinking this skim milk and with chocolate syrup, until I met this patient who talked to me about carbohydrates and changing my diet. And I was on all these medicines. I was routinely being scoped with a big fiber optic scope, going down the best advanced, medical systems looking at me. And yet I was continuously getting worse until I met this patient who told me about cutting out carbohydrates. And I did. I changed my diet, cut out processed foods. And within a year, all of my medical conditions either completely went away or they were substantially better. And it was not a placebo effect, because when I did that, I was trying to lose weight. No, that guy didn't tell me, oh, by the way, all your medical conditions will get better. He never said that. And so when it happened, I was like shocked. I'm like, wait a minute, what happened? So I decided that I had to become a researcher, and I changed my focus from being a reactionary. The quintessential reactionary physician is your emergency medicine doctor. He and she waits till something happens, goes wrong, and then we engage. And we don't give a thought about any prevention. But when you have a wake-up call and all your medical conditions, go substantially away or completely away, then you're confronted by a paradigm shift in your own understanding of how your body maintains its health or loses it. And so I went into research in 2013, joined a research practice up in Minneapolis. And it was there that I learned about this very interesting biomarker called visceral fat. And we had an MRI scanner that we owned in a research practice we operate on. So I could scan myself every day and look at all these interesting aspects. And what we did in our research practice, we challenged ourselves to stop looking at diagnostic imagery, MRIs, from a perspective of looking at a single problem or isolated problems, but to look at metrics and things to reverse disease instead of trying to treat it and addressing one problem at a time. So think of MRI goes holistic medicine, and that's what we did. And we filed for a grant with the National Science Foundation to fund additional studies looking at this interesting biomarker visceral fat. And we learned subsequently about many other biomarkers like fat around the heart, which is a type of visceral fat. Viscera means organ. So another type of organ fat is fat around the heart. And then another interesting biomarker that we found out about too, that we figured out our own, was fatty infiltrates in the muscles. And so interesting, I'll share with you and your audience today that just about a month ago, AI, actually not chat AI, but AI figured out, looking through imagery, that these fatty infiltrates in the muscles are associated with doubling your risk for heart attacks and strokes. So we've known about these for over 30 years. They've been out there, we've seen them. But here's the remarkable thing. Why hasn't anybody done anything about this if it's a bad thing? And that's the problem. We only know about problems that we're trained in, that we can make some money off. But when it's something that we don't have any treatment for, it's not part of our training, it's just not included in the curriculum of physicians or in their regular professional practice. But in our research practice, we saw how important it was, and we started to eliminate visceral fat, and we saw the impact it had on these fatty infiltrates in the muscles, fat around the heart, and also atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, which is basically clogging of the arterial system in the body. So all of these things improve through lifestyle change without dependency, use, or need for prescription drugs. So I'm super excited about that, because one means that we can actually get people healthy without expensive medications or even cheap medications. You don't need to have surgical procedures. It's just lifestyle adjustment. And so it makes it easier and simplistic to follow. And so I always look for opportunities to bring awareness to people about the importance of these biomarkers. And the other thing to give your audience some hope is, during this time period when we follow visceral fat and follow these other biomarkers to elimination in the body, we noticed the body changes considerably. The body becomes more healthy appearing, more attractive. You develop muscle mass. You lose fat and obesity. Certainly obesity is abated. And human performance improves. So we could get people more healthy appearing, but the really surprising thing is we got people performing better across the board. They walked better, they stood better, they balanced better, they played tennis better, they played chess better. All of these things improved. And so the effect of that is to me, as a researcher, is it makes me feel hopeful that corporate America is going to embrace this thing when conventional healthcare may not, simply because if you get people healthier, not only can you reduce the costs, healthcare costs that many large companies have to pay for directly themselves, but you can also get this exploitable benefit in terms of increased performance and increased productivity of employees. So you can look in the future, Serena, for large self-funded, self-insured corporations of 1,000 employees or more. You'll see that in the future, they'll be embracing these strategies for optimizing people's health and new biomarkers and a new holistic way of approaching health, because out of necessity, they're going to need to do that to improve the effectiveness and the profitability of their companies. And so I'm super excited about the future. It's a great approach, and it really does work.
So let me ask you, and I talked to Dr. Chafee and asked him something similar recently. When people are trying to get healthier, for people, it's always typically about weight. You very rarely hear somebody say, I'm on a diet or I'm changing my eating because I need to get healthier. It's always because I need to lose weight. How do you think we can change that narrative for people to go from just wanting to lose weight to really wanting to optimize their health and live longer?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think we started getting interested in weight because it's a red herring that conventional healthcare brings out there, because it doesn't really provide focus or an efficient approach to that situation. So weight, it really turns on the type of tissue you lose. I mean, maybe you're losing muscle, and that's not beneficial. And so people that lose weight don't necessarily hit their health goals. What you want to lose is diseased tissue inside of your body. So things that either are an expression of disease or cause disease. And both of this is the case when it comes to visceral fat. So a more informed approach, slightly heading in the right direction, is using a scale called a bioimpedance scale that gives some additional information other than just how much you weigh. It tells you how much fat you have and helps you to understand whether you're losing fat and you're losing or whether you're losing muscle mass. And it can tell you if you're increasing muscle mass. So those are rough approximation. It uses electrical current because of the difference in muscle mass and fat. It does provide additional information, but better still is an MRI. And so an MRI, muscles show up as dark. So here you can see these muscles and actually measure them. Fat shows up as white. So if your physician were to understand and use the MRI for the purposes of optimizing health, they could work to reduce the white and reduce and increase the darkness that would be in muscle. So one really good basic start is to increase your ratio of muscle to fat so that you have more muscle and less fat. But you can focus in on fat even more. There's good fat and bad fat. So you want to lose the bad fat. Bad fat is visceral fat. Subcutaneous fat, which is fat underneath the skin, is actually protective. So you want to have a layer of subcutaneous fat. Nobody gets it perfect. Probably the closest human, kind of health kind of figure, to try to shoot towards is Tarzan. But bodybuilders, one of the problems I have with bodybuilders is they put on muscle mass and then they work to cut subcutaneous fat so that they look more, desirable during a competition. Well, that subcutaneous fat is protective. It has adiponectin in it, which is an interesting molecule that is associated with lower levels of cardiovascular disease. So in the bodybuilding community, we see some individuals getting increased levels of cardiovascular disease subsequently down the road. It's probably because of their elimination of subcutaneous fat so much and their loss of that protection that comes from adiponectin. So it's an informed consumer that gets better services. So what you really want to do is basically increase your sub-Q fat, not too much. There's a sweet spot, the Goldilocks kind of approach to it. And you want to decrease your visceral fat, and then you want to increase and maintain your muscle mass, but not too much. So visceral fat is bad. Go ahead and get rid of all of it or as much as you can. Muscle mass is good. You don't want to put on too much. And you don't want to put it on, and subcutaneous fat is good, and you don't want to put on too much of that where you become, morbidly obese. So Goldilocks applies to sub-Q fat and muscle mass. The anorexics get it wrong too. They're too thin, too little muscle, too little fat. And then sadly, we have within our population individuals, and increasingly a larger amount of them, who are either tolerant to or sadly worse, attracted to obesity. So levels of excessive amount of fat on the body. So they're all forms and expressions of body dysmorphism, where you have an unhealthy perspective about physiology and the appearance of your body. So in this day and age, with chronic disease being higher today at 2023 than at any point in the history of the human species, we really need to be addressing the necessity to follow and tracking the right information that gives you the most optimized form of physiology. Yet none of these things that I probably just shared with you have ever been a part of a discussion of you or your listening audience with respect to discussions they've had with their physician. Physicians, what do they talk? Typically dominate their conversations with their patients about cholesterol. And cholesterol is, in my opinion, very similar to a scale. There's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. And then there's a lack of uniformity and agreement about what the numbers, should look like and what they should be. Everybody has kind of a different opinion. But when it comes to visceral fat, nobody is supporting visceral fat. Everybody understands that visceral fat is bad. So you can just immediately get rid of that and knock it out of the ballpark by improving your health, eliminating as much as possible. But cholesterol, I think, increasingly is being scrutinized by patients today, consumers who realize, they spend a lot of time, money, and effort on cholesterol medicines, and to what benefit? You oftentimes you get side effects, but nobody really starts cholesterol medicines and have any, improved benefit to their health or their quality of life. But when you get rid of visceral fat, it's going to change your life, especially if you've been suffering a lot of chronic disease. And visceral fat operates through inflammatory substances. So that gets secreted by that visceral fat. And so the longer you've been exposed to your visceral fat and the more that you have, the more likely it is that you will have chronic disease, and therefore the more increased benefit that you will derive when you get rid of that visceral fat. So who benefits the most? Middle-aged and older people that are filled with visceral fat and had it for a long time. Who benefits the least potentially in terms of symptoms and performance improvement? Like teenagers. They have visceral fat, but they haven't been exposed to it long enough. But here's one thing that the teenagers have over the older people. They're going to have a normal, optimizing life that you and I have not had. So if you can educate a young person in their teenage years or in their 20s about this better approach to healthcare and optimizing their health by eliminating visceral fat, they will never get visceral fat and they will never accumulate chronic disease. And so when they're my age, in their 60s or 70s, they're going to look remarkably better, astoundingly better. It'll be like bricks and clouds compared to people that have accumulated chronic disease. So the message is still the same for everybody, regardless of your age and regardless of the level of disease you have. You want to live a life that minimizes badness in the body, minimizes visceral fat, minimizes heart fat, minimizes fat within the muscles, these infiltrating streaks of inflammatory fat in the muscles called myosteatosis, and then minimizes all the downstream side effects that you get from these bad biomarkers, these bad fat depots, like clogged arteries, and then neurodegenerative conditions to include Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, memory impairment, declining cognition. So yeah, visceral fat is probably the very first expression of disease, things going wrong in the body. And we see it in kids. When I was, had my own scanner, I would scan my kids as early as, 5 years of age. One of my sons got scanned, and we could see that he, at the age of 5, had visceral fat that was accumulating because of the waffles and pancakes and crappy food that, he was exposed to before I had realized and was aware of visceral fat and the dietary role and importance of lifestyle in terms of causing visceral fat and contributing or causing subsequently chronic disease. So super important, super exciting. Really glad that you have me on your show to be able to share this with your audience.
A minute ago, you mentioned that everybody knows visceral fat is unhealthy and everybody is trying to get rid of that. But I think that the media must have missed the message, because we keep seeing all of these things about how fat is fine. We're glorifying people that are obese in a lot of cases. And a lot of people believe that if you're fat and happy, that it's fine as long as you don't have any major health issues going on right now. Is it possible to be fat and happy and healthy?
No, I don't think it is. I agree with you that the media is playing unfortunately a harmful role in changing the paradigm and the perceptions by their viewing audience with regard to fat. So I think that is a great disservice for people to perceive that fat should be something that we should tolerate. 50,000 years ago, if the average person showed up with the level of obesity that we see today, fat on their body, and we're around humans 50,000 years ago, the humans' jaws would drop open because they would have never seen anybody so awful looking. It would be so shocking and glaring and incompatible with the existence of life and health that we enjoyed 50,000 years ago. Now, with processed foods playing a huge contributory role, and the focus off of basically more important measures of health that I think our species had, which is literally how you look and how you perform over the existence of humanity, guided decisions about how you lived. And today, it's basically your cholesterol test that your doctor, who looks really bad and performs really bad themselves, is telling you is important. So I think the media has bought into that, and because you can be heavy like that and have low cholesterol, they think that it's appropriate to tout healthy at any weight, kind of ideology, and I resoundingly reject that. But there is also, I think, an important discussion that needs to be had about subcutaneous fat. So sometimes people have, some subcutaneous fat, and you may not be able to see a six-pack. And so for that reason, I think also people go to an extreme where and I actually think a six-pack is extreme. I really do, because it represents a lack of beneficial protective subcutaneous fat. The successful human being for 4 million years maintained a modest ribbon of fat, subcutaneous fat, around their musculature, which basically said, I know how to hunt, I can catch meat, and I live well. You don't do that as well as I do, and you have like no layer, you don't have anything in the bank. I got a little bit. This is before even numbers were available or had even been developed. So basically, the earliest bank account, for a human being was this subcutaneous fat and muscle mass, that they had. It showed that these humans had a derived benefit from how they live, and so you could form opinions about the effectiveness that somebody lives based on how they looked and how they performed. Those people would have been the alpha leaders in our clans and tribes, and the rest of the training and clan and tribe would have ascribed to their methodology and followed their recommendations and wanted to be like them. So they were kind of the natural born leaders because they were best. And that's where the kings in the monarchy rose from, early clans. They were the best hunters. They were awesome, warlords. They were really good. But then when the advent of agriculture side came around and we started planting grains and we accumulate food, and then currency came around, then greed came in. But before then, you could, if you were a hunter, how many animal skins could you actually hold on to? Only one, the one you wore, and maybe one backup. And that was about it. So everything else you caught, you ate, and then you gave away. And so it allowed for, those 4 million years, nobility, to be basically very idealistic. And today's monarchy is greedy. They're rife, just like everybody else, with excess. And so, yeah, they formerly had some great genetic material, but that genetic material has been degraded over the years with excessive lifestyles that I don't much think for the monarchy. I have no interest in them, actually, other than at some point in time they had some benefit. But today, if you're listening, my definition of health as a health and performance optimizing physician is simply the level of health in somebody is come down to two basic things. It's how healthy they look, how well they look, and how well they perform. And I want you to think about that. Is there anything else more important than how you look and how you perform? And so, and the reason why I add that look in there, because I don't want you to be some kind of fantastic chess player that's fat, obese, and can't get up out of a chair, but you can play killer chess. When I'm talking about performance, I mean everything. You play chess well, you play tennis well. You jump up on rocks, you climb trees, you sprint, you walk, everything you perform well, and you look good. You look attractive, you look healthy, you look vital and vigorous. And I've never heard any other doctor talk about this. I don't know. I'm not that intelligent, but I am consumed with passion to try to improve people. And that's what I saw. What happens the most, changes the most impactful return on the elimination of these harmful fat depots in the body, visceral fat, heart fat, and muscle fat, as people's appearance improves and their performance improves. So it all comes down to that. That's what I advocate for my client patients that work with me. I tell them I'm going to improve your appearance, I'm going to improve your performance, and as a result, your level of health is going to get better. And when your level of health gets better, your quality of living gets better. That's a real important metric for people to be aware of. It's called health span. And for too long, we've just paid attention to longevity, getting people to live long. 78 years of age, I think we're close to 77 now. The life expectancy, by the way, life expectancy is, for the first time in the history of humanity, nobody's really talking about it, is declining. So notwithstanding all the advancements in conventional healthcare, medications and procedures and the like, we're actually losing our ability to get people to live longer, because the disease process is outgrowing and outrunning our ability to treat it and overcome it. So people are living less and less. And so it's not anything we should be patting ourselves on the back that we can get people to live 77 years of life, and that's longer than any other period of human existence. We have never been more diseased than we are currently today. And so it is a sad state of affairs that we've gotten ourselves into.
I would argue that you are very intelligent. And the other thing that I want to ask you is about chronic diseases and autoimmune diseases. Is it possible to reverse these? And if so, why aren't other doctors doing this? Do they just not know?
Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely. We saw a number of autoimmune diseases and chronic diseases in 6,000 people that we studied for the National Science Foundation, where we'd scan visceral fat, just targeting that and developing lifestyle strategies to effectively remove it, that all their chronic diseases, it wasn't just me, it was in our study that all their chronic diseases improved when they got rid of their visceral fat. And so to include autoimmunity. So very, very exciting results. In fact, a study just came out a couple of days ago showing psoriasis being reversed and being associated with visceral fat in studies. So if you suffer today and you're listening to any autoimmune disorder or chronic disease, I would suggest strongly that you just go to Google and put your disease process in, comma, visceral fat. And you'll likely see that there's been studies in the past showing its connection to visceral fat. And then I would implore you to eliminate visceral fat to see its impact and improvement on it. And your second part of your question, why aren't more physicians talking about it? Well, it's because, this is astounding. Your audience, I hope, will be astounded by this because they don't know about it. It's not taught in medical school. So how is it not taught in medical school? Do you see all that white in there? That white inside this MRI scan is visceral fat. It's the largest part of the abdomen in the average human being. Nothing else takes up more space in the average human. I'm not talking obese, morbidly obese. The average human, nothing takes up more space in their abdomen than visceral fat. How can it be that physicians don't know about it? You can go, just Google this. I'm going to do a post on it. MRI abdominal anatomy, MRI abdominal anatomy, or CT abdominal anatomy. They'll have arrows going to every daggone little thing in here. But the biggest part of it, there will be no arrow. It's not taught to us in medical school. Every single medical school curriculum in medical school is standardized by an organization, I forget, it's kind of a medical school association that sets these curriculum. It is, in my opinion, left out of that curriculum. And I'm going to say, just so news that somebody kills me, goes after me, is because I'm onto them. I think there is a organized effort to keep for physicians to be aware of visceral fat. It's coordinated at the level of medical school curriculums, because if you eliminate visceral fat, nothing else improves humans more. And so the end result of that is, it is a direct threat on the largest part of our economy in our country today, which is healthcare. And so if you eliminate that visceral fat, then the largest part of economy, which many individuals in small channels and lanes maintain a great deal of benefit from, are going to lose that benefit. And they're highly protective of it. So do not look for any strong existence from conventional healthcare, insurance companies, or especially big pharma to be promoting visceral fat awareness. But your clients, your podcast audience today, Serena, who's listening today, can learn about it, self-study it, and begin eliminating it. They don't have to wait for transformational change to happen from passionate physicians. I stumbled across this. I'm a dumb ER doctor. How in the world could an ER physician, become so passionate about something that's so strongly related to, prevention of chronic disease, when I was formerly that physician who just loved gunshots, stabbings, heart attacks, strokes, aortic dissections, vehicular trauma. That was my whole bend, reaction to true emergencies. Now I've changed completely, done a 180-degree turn, and now my passion is trying to take on the largest problem in humanity, which is chronic disease, because chronic disease, nothing else, no other problem costs us more money. No other problem do we waste more money. No other problem impacts the quality of lives, reduces human productivity, and no other problem kills people more than chronic disease. And the single most important strategy for eliminating that problem that I call the giant, to slay the giant, the only thing you got to do, it's Achilles tendon, is visceral fat. You eliminate that visceral fat, and that giant falls with a fatal blow and won't recover. And so we can change our entire economy, and we need to build it back where healthcare is actually based on human performance improvement, and you actually improve the level of health of humans. Right now, if everybody listening to your show went investigated conventional healthcare, the only thing that's improving is profits within big pharma, pharmaceutical channels, the healthcare system, and the insurance companies. Do you imagine? I mean, astoundingly, if you're young and you're listening, look at your parents or your grandparents. Look at them. They keep worsening. They can spend more and more on healthcare, and they're worsening. Why be a part of a system where you spend more and more money and more time, and you keep getting worse? This isn't aging. This is bad living because we're not paying attention to how we live. So it's an enormous problem, but one that we can solve by educating people about it.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. O'Mara. It was wonderful to have you with us.
Yeah, well, I'm super glad to have had the opportunity to be with you, Serena, and your audience. I think this is an important discussion, and I look forward to future discussions.
And don't forget to come back and join us on the Carnivore Revolution for Dr. O'Mara Part 2.